Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Whitaker, an adjunct professor of communications at Prince George's Community College in Largo, Maryland. And today we're talking with Chuck Carney, who is the Director of Media Relations at Indiana University. So, Chuck, welcome, first of all. And tell us a little bit about IU, and then tell us what a media relations director does.
Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for asking me to be here. Happy to talk to you today. So, my role as Director of Media Relations is to speak for the university when I need to. I'm the primary spokesperson for Indiana University, but pretty much as the title says, I help direct media to things when we need to. So it can be sometimes we're putting out information that we want media to know about to get out to the broader public, or it may simply be that media are calling me to ask questions about something. So my job is to help answer those questions, help direct to our faculty experts when we can do that, and try to help make sure that the public, which includes our constituents of the state of Indiana, our alumni, our current students, the families of current students, that they have the information that they need. Plus, that we're just simply communicating out because we want to make sure that people know about Indiana University as a whole. We're a public institution. We have nearly 100,000 students on all of our campuses at 9 spots throughout the state. We have a large flagship campus in Bloomington and a campus of pretty large size in Indianapolis as well at IUPUI. So we have a great responsibility being a public institution in the state of Indiana to make sure that we are good stewards of the dollars that we're given, not only by the state of Indiana, but also by our people who come here and pay tuition. So my job is to help facilitate that public conversation and information from IU. And it's, by the way, a job that I love. It has been a thrill of my life. I've had a fairly lengthy career, and this is one of the most enjoyable things, although one of the most demanding things that I've ever done.
So, one final question about being a media relations director. Is it a 24/7 job, or are you able to do 9 to 5?
I think it's actually 25/8. So yeah, it's around the clock. And so in these days of COVID, I've been working from my home office, and this is my home office. And so I work from here. My days start about 6:30 generally, and I am often working until some bit until about 10 o'clock at night. Now, I'm not necessarily sitting at this desk that entire time, of course. I try to break it up, but there are days that I'm here for very long periods of time on the phone, doing Zoom calls, and talking to people about what they have questions about. It depends on what's going on, of course. I consider a good week when I have 2 days on the weekend and I don't have any calls to answer, no emails that are urgent, and I can put it off until Monday morning. But that's the understanding of the role. That's why I was hired to do what I do, is to be responsive. And frankly, I'm a former reporter myself, and I know from being on the other end that if I call and I'm seeking information and I need to get it quickly, well, I just need to get it quickly, and the demands, the deadline don't go away for the reporter. So being very cognizant of that, I am very aware that I need to get information out there quickly often. The challenge, of course, is I have to get the correct information out there. And so I have to talk to a lot of people and make sure that what I am sharing is correct, and that I know what I need to know, and get that out there. So that's the biggest challenge. I mean, it's 24/7 because there is no news cycle anymore, really. It's just a constant churn. We used to be able to rely upon the fact that newspapers were put to bed at midnight, that newscasts were over at basically midnight. That's not the case anymore. The internet means that there is no news cycle. Everything is the news cycle, and all the time is the news cycle. So that's just part of the role. And I don't know what it would be like doing this job in a time before the internet. I wonder how much more quiet it might have been, it's one of the great challenges of the role, and frankly, it's a challenge I like to take on, and I hope that I do it well.
Great. So, one of the challenges that you've had for the last year is dealing with COVID because it was just about a year ago that all of a sudden every college in the country announced they were shutting down. They were sending
Mhm.
everybody home. 2 weeks from now, we'll all be online. You all will be able to do your stuff perfectly, and there will be no issues or problems. And what I'm interested in exploring from the public relations aspect is how did you handle this function? When were you starting to think about that there may be an issue? And then walk us through step by step. And I think we should note, and I hope you will start off by doing this, that IU has had a fabulous set of results on the way it has handled COVID. It's one of the
Mhm.
uh, almost handful of major universities that has actually had very low rates all through the entire pandemic. So off to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I can honestly say this, and this is truly not just PR talk, and not because I'm an alum of the university also, but I can honestly say that there is nothing I'm prouder of than how Indiana University has handled this situation, because we have done the things that needed to be done, which were not always easy and haven't always been met with applause by everyone. So we have done what needed to be done, and the results of that are that we are at historic lows with the COVID positivity rate around all of our campuses. At Bloomington, I think it's at 0.2% as we sit here and speak today. Had we had that in the fall semester, at the start of the semester, or even at this far into a semester, about midway point, it would have been a probably different story. But the reason we've gotten here is because, first of all, we were able to communicate what it is that we were doing on a very high and broad level. We have the benefit of some really, really talented people who I work with, and really, I can't emphasize this enough, that my job in this has been fairly easy compared to what a lot of other people have had to do. I get to go out and speak about things that a lot of other people have developed, and that they have been working on. Things like our COVID dashboard. We have a full web page, covid.iu.edu, which has been a website created for this situation in the fall. That was fall2020.iu.edu. We converted the web name for the spring semester to covid.iu.edu. If you go there, it's just a wealth of information, including the current status of COVID on all of our campuses. You can break it down by all of our campuses in a drop-down menu. There's a dashboard of results there, but it also answers a ton of questions, and that has been added to as we've gone through this. So right now, one of the big things that we're dealing with is, of course, vaccines, and when students may be eligible and when staff may be eligible. So we're going through all of that and answering those questions. And I'll share a little bit more about what we've done, but let me back up to where you asked to go at the very beginning. So, as a testament to the breadth of Indiana University, we first started talking about this as a public health issue in late December. So if you think back about how this developed, December 2019, this was not really on the national forefront until later in January, probably, well, early January, I think it'd probably be fair to say it was. People were talking about it, but at that point, we had this showing up in China. It was starting to get bad, maybe in Italy and some other places. So it was becoming a concern, and there was some feeling that we might have a spread in the state of Indiana, and of course on our IU campuses, particularly because we have students who are from China. We have students who were then studying abroad, so we had that concern. But we had a meeting with a public health professional from IU who I will tell you, he's really into his job, and I would say that he probably almost as a hobby keeps an eye on these worldwide disease developments. But he's really good at it, and he had an eye on this in December. In January, we started having some meetings. I think late January was our first scheduled meeting, saying this is going to be bad. And I remember at that meeting, one of our administrators said, because I think I asked the question about, well, we need to be prepared for discussing when the first IU student has a positive case. And he said, well, yeah, you're probably right, but after a while, that's going to be fairly irrelevant, meaning that the numbers are going to be pretty big no matter what we do across the country. And sure enough, he was right. So I think our folks had an idea of the scale of this from the very start. So because of that, we built the website. We were prepared to do the dashboard and report out what the information that we needed to get to the public was, what our positivity rates were. But all along, there was a discussion among what's called our medical response team about what we would need to do to get back to campus. So you mentioned that everybody went online in March of last year. So we did the same thing. We broke for spring break. The spring break was extended by a week. We thought we would come back after 2 weeks, give everybody a chance to get things under control. It was very clear pretty early into that break that wasn't going to happen. We moved to fully online for the rest of the spring semester. So at that point, we began to focus on how do we get back to campus. So our president, the leaders of all of our campuses, our medical response team, our professionals in healthcare, including the dean of the School of Medicine at Indiana University, led a restart committee that began looking at what we could then do to ensure the health and safety of students, faculty, and staff. They put together a plan, looked at scenarios, and from the very beginning, what we did that a lot of places frankly didn't do was believe that frequent testing was going to have to be a cornerstone of this. So we developed a mitigation testing plan that required our students, faculty, and staff to be tested when they came back to campus. And so once a week, they would have to go submit themselves to spit into a tube and get this test done. They had to be tested to come back to campus. And what that allowed us to do is to really keep an eye on any hotspots. So at the beginning of the fall semester, we had some areas, Greek houses in Bloomington for one, that were hotspots, and we had some outbreaks, and we had to isolate people, and we had to get people that had to get them away from the regular population. That kept us from getting into a worse situation and limited the spread. It allowed us to stay open and doing hybrid and online classes in the fall semester, and then eventually led us to getting to a point where we now have this historic low of positivity rates on our campuses. Along with that, had to do all kinds of messaging about safe practices. Everybody has to wear a mask in class. It's just absolutely not negotiable. If you are in a gathering of people, you have to wear a mask. We didn't have large classes. We didn't have large gatherings. There were no fans at football and basketball. All of those things had to be done. And again, they weren't popular, and they still aren't popular with some people, but they had to be done so that we could do this successfully. Because in the end, our job is to educate people. And for us to be able to do that, we had to be able to keep them safe. This is the way we're able to keep people safe. And by the way, our students who have seen signs all over our campuses about, you have to wear your mask, you have to stay 6 feet apart, you make sure that you wash your hands frequently, things like that. Those students have done the job. And the proof is 0.2% positivity rate on the Bloomington campus, around that or lower at other places. They've worn the masks, they've done the hard work, and that's a testament to them. It's also a testament to the fact that they were listening and they have been paying attention, and we appreciate that. And it's not always the case where you can point to something you do in communications and you know that people were listening and they did do the right thing. I think you can say that's a success in this case.
So I recall that early in September, well, I recall a couple of things, one of which I know for a fact, the other of which is a story. What I know for a fact is that shortly after the students returned, there was a spike, as you say,
Hmm.
and the president of the university put out a letter,
Yeah.
basically that said we're not going to have to put up with this. And his closing line was, "There's millions of people who are saying that you will cause this disease to spread throughout the country. Prove them wrong." And I
Hmm.
thought that that was almost a masterstroke. Now, I'm not. I'm assuming you did not write that letter,
No.
but it was sort of typical, I think, of the approach that you all took.
Yeah, I think it was, and yeah, that was strictly from President McRobbie, and yeah, he took a tough line there, as we had a few circumstances where there were a couple of house parties that had 100-ish people at them, and clearly not social distancing, clearly not masking, and that got a lot of attention. There's video of everything now, and so somebody caught it on their cell phone, that got viral online, that got a lot of attention. But the president issued a challenge basically to our students that, if you want this to work, if you do want to be back on campus, as you said you wanted to be, you're going to have to do these things. And, I would say this: we do recognize too that it's a small percentage of our student population. At Bloomington, that's 43,000 students. So there's a small percentage that was participating in these parties, but nonetheless significant. And it couldn't go unaddressed. So President McRobbie addressed it fairly strongly. And yeah, the end of that letter is something that sticks in my mind too, where he said, prove them wrong. And they have. For the large part, we have been able to do things successfully. And that's really a testament to the students. And I think you have to, in my role, I try to make sure whenever I do interviews on this, people are asking me about how we've been able to navigate this, that I point out that we don't go without recognizing that students did the hard work. I remember being an undergraduate, and I remember I've sort of tried to put myself in their shoes about what this would mean, having to deal with these things in my undergraduate days. It certainly would have been a downer at the very least. But I think that since it's everybody, it's not just the IU campuses, our students came to recognize that, look, this is just the world that we're in right now. And on some level, it's sort of like when airline safety changed after 9/11, although this probably is not nearly that permanent. It's just how things are. Our students accepted that. We tried to reward them as much as we could and when we could. And it's one reason why we think we'll be able to go back to a mostly normal fall semester.
And one of the things that struck me as interesting was that you all avoided a lot of talk of sanctions.
Mhm.
Some other universities were talking about it. If you violate our rules, we will expel you from campus. We'll put it on your transcript. You'll never get into another college, and so on and so forth. But the IU approach was almost 180 degrees away from that. But you did do sanctions occasionally, at least according to one
Mhm.
story I heard about one of the Greek houses. For my
Mhm.
community college students, Greek houses are fraternities and sororities. Okay, just so you are into the four-year language thing there. Uh, and one of those houses, I guess the IU police department went out and said, you guys can't be doing what you're doing. And they
Mhm.
said, this is private property, get off. And they said, you're absolutely right, it is private property. Got off and immediately called the county health department, which showed up with a order to shut the place down and quarantine everybody for 2 weeks, which, I assume that word got around quickly too. Now, I don't know if that's a true story, but that's what I heard. And I wonder if
Well,
you heard that.
yeah, I don't. There's nothing that I can think of specifically that describes. However, the general circumstance, I would say, is absolutely true. And this is also an important thing to point out. And as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at an email I just got from the Monroe County Health Department on another matter. And the Monroe County Health Department, the local health department in Bloomington, has been a strong partner on all of this. And I would say that all of our other campuses, that is also the case. We have worked very closely with the county health departments and our local government partners. I think if you're going to do something like this, you got to communicate with them very strongly, and you have to stay in constant contact. So among the things, you've seen the Ask Aaron webinars, which I actually sort of glossed over. We didn't talk about that, but we can go back to that in a moment. We've also done since I think in March of last year, we started doing a Friday 1 o'clock news conference on Zoom with the county health department, the city of Bloomington, the Monroe County commissioners, the Indiana University Health, which is the local hospital system, and IU, just to talk about the COVID issues that are going on with local media. And it's gotten good attention. The media has shown up every week and asked good questions. It's also on Facebook, on the mayor's page, and on the local cable access system. That has been fruitful from a few standpoints, that we have really helped solidify those relationships with the Monroe County Health Department. So there are things, the fraternity and sorority houses, and this is something that's difficult to understand for people who are not familiar with IU. Those are on the IU campus, but they are actually private houses. So there's a limit to how much we can tell them. We can't tell them to do some things, but we can also, if they don't comply with Indiana University regulations, then they can be unlicensed or unsanctioned as an IU fraternity or sorority. So we do have some say, and they have to be our partners to make sure that they keep students safe who are living there. Monroe County Health Department can issue something saying you've got to shut this down, because they're just like any other congregate living place, an apartment complex in Bloomington or anything like that. If the Monroe County Health Department deems it unsafe, then people have to move out, and that's it. So the health department does do that kind of work, and they've been a partner in this. So they may well have gone to a house party and said, you're going to have to shut it down. The local police certainly would, because there is an ordinance still in effect about gatherings of over 15 in Bloomington. It also, from a PR standpoint, should not go unsaid that the importance of communicating and being seen as partners to these agencies, to the city, to the county health department, to the local hospital, is so valuable in a community like Bloomington, where everything revolves around the university. I mean, Bloomington itself is less than 100,000 people. Well, we have 43,000 students alone at IU Bloomington. So when the fall semester starts, it's a whole new town. The summer is very different in Bloomington when the students aren't here in as many numbers. So the big worry in the fall, of course, was from the community, saying, you're all going to come in here and bring disease to a whole new level, and we're going to have an outbreak. Well, that proved to not be true. And one of the things we've been saying for a while is it's safer to be on an IU campus in the state of Indiana than it is to be anywhere else in the state of Indiana, because we've been doing the work to make sure that the people here are, in fact, generally not carrying the disease, because we've been checking. If we had mitigation testing on a large level at the national level, imagine how different this might have been. It's an expensive proposition, but we were able to do that, and we did do that.
Yeah, and the mitigation testing, and what he's referring to there is the regular routine testing of students and faculty and so on, with an emphasis in areas where they think there may be an outbreak of the disease, so that they're able to catch it quickly and quarantine if they need to or whatever, but basically assist and prevent the spread. So that's what happened with 108 New England colleges and universities. They did the same sort of thing. Duke University did the same sort of thing. Every school that's done that has basically had that magic 0.2% positivity rate. And that's also what they did in Australia and New Zealand and even Slovakia over in Europe, which has done exactly the same approach. And that works. And combined with masking and other things, it actually prevented these areas from getting huge infections until the vaccines came out. And now, of course, they're hoping to get the vaccines out very quickly. But, it's not just some magic that happened in Bloomington, but a lot of, well, I won't say a lot, a relative handful of countries and a relative handful of colleges and universities adopted that approach, and they all came out just fine. So, but you had to communicate this out to your different constituents. So can you break down the strategy for us in talking to uh, and we can take this in either direction you want to. I'm going to start with the
Mhm.
public at large. So the
Mhm.
people in Bloomington, the people in the state of Indiana, and then no, let's go the other way, Chuck. Let's start with your internal audiences, right? So you've
Yeah.
got the students, you've got the faculty and staff. Those are two different constituencies.
Mhm.
Um, then you've got the state of Indiana as a corporate entity,
Mhm.
and you've got finally the public in Bloomington, the public in the state of Indiana, and the larger public around the country, around the world. Can you sort of talk us through the strategy for each one of those? And I gather that you're going to tell me, first of all, it was one of great transparency and openness and disclosure, but go from there. And how did you deal with each one of those?
Yeah, yeah, and that was the key thing. I mean, again, going back to the point that we're a public institution, and so we have to be transparent. That is one of the things that is a key point. Now, we we had to be sure that there was a trusted and continuous and ongoing communication between us, those parties. So early on, our medical professionals connected with the State Department of Health, which is not unusual. I mean, we work with them on any number of issues. Last year before, we had, I think it was in the spring of 2019, we had a mumps outbreak on campus. And it was, mumps doesn't have to have many cases for it to be considered an outbreak officially. So we were pretty early on in communicating with the State Department of Health in that. I remember I hosted a news conference at one point, a real in-person news conference, not on Zoom, and because it had become such a big media deal, and that looks quaint at this point, as we've done so many other things. But that we were already really connected to the State Department of Health, and our medical professionals and our emergency health professionals were already connected on that level. So I referred to the early meetings about the potential impact on our campus, on our campuses around the state. That involved State Department of Health people from the very beginning. We also connected with our local Department of Health at that point as well, and made sure we were communicating with them. We really tried to begin by communicating first to our departments of health what we were thinking about, and trying to coordinate with them with what they were thinking about, and making sure that we were reporting with them consistently. And then from that point, we had to simply communicate with our, I would say it was almost an inside out development. And this involves, by the way, I don't want anybody to get the impression that I somehow did all of this, because that would be ridiculous beyond belief. This was a lot of people that worked on this campaign that were not me, but they developed the materials for signs that would go on all of our campuses, but also have posters that would be shared outside the campuses. So in the city of Bloomington, for instance, we took the concept of our signage with what we were trying to do to tell people to stay 6 feet apart, to wear masks. And we were distributing that to the city of Bloomington and Monroe County so that they could use the exact same materials and put their own logo on it. So the idea was to have a consistency and a look, so that people who traveled between campuses or off campus would see the same thing, and it would help re-emphasize that idea. One of the standpoints of public relations is, you tell them and you tell them again, and then you tell them one more time, and tell them again after that, to try to get that point home. So that was part of it. We just kept doing that. And then all of our campuses around the state used the same signage. We pointed to the same COVID website. We were using the same information to share the same things, and we were coordinated around all of those campuses. Now, our campuses cover the entire state, quite literally. I mean, we're in Bloomington. I'm sitting in Bloomington right now, which is Southwest Indiana. We have a campus, IU Southeast, which is next, just across the river from Louisville. IU East is right next to the Ohio line. We have IU Northwest, which is near Chicago. We have IU South Bend, which is a little further away from Chicago. IU Fort Wayne, which is closer to Michigan. So we get across the state, and of course the Indianapolis campus, we get across the state in a lot of ways just because of size and spread. So consistency of messaging there allowed us to help spread it just because we have so many people around the state on so many campuses. So that's an advantage to begin with. But we kept at that same consistent look, feel, and voices, frankly, too. So we mentioned the Ask Aaron webinars. We've been hosting those. I think we've done something along the lines of maybe 50 at this point. It's got to be more than that. It's probably about in the 70 mark at this point. And we've been doing those every week for all of IU, but then we also have special editions that are tailored to particular campuses, to the regional campuses around the state, to particular groups, Greek life groups as well, things like that. And that's been a consistent thing that we've done throughout, so that Aaron Carroll, who is our director of mitigation and surveillance, but also the professor of pediatrics at the IU School of Medicine, can speak to a lot of issues across the board about COVID as a medical and health issue. Dr. Carroll writes for the New York Times, among others, and is very well known nationally. He was on NPR earlier this week talking about this. And so he gave us a natural and very good voice to be out there and communicate about it. That gave us a lot of credibility too. So finding credible voices is key. And you want somebody beyond the spokesperson, because no matter how good I may be or not, you want to make sure that you have somebody else who adds to that credibility of what your institution is saying and doing. And I think Dr. Carroll is an excellent representative of the university from that standpoint. He can do pretty much anything you want in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've leaned on him a lot. So, I think that if you wanted to sum it up in sort of a sentence, it's almost an inside out for the whole world. We started with this: we're going to communicate this to our community, and then we're going to spread it out. And I think that that's been consistent as we've spoken to all of our constituencies, and it's reached as far away as Maryland, certainly, and other places where we have people who are paying attention to this. And I think that served us well. It's allowed us to not just look credible, because I think we are credible, but look competent. And trust is the key of the realm in this. If you don't look like you know what you're doing, then people are going to get the idea you don't know what you're doing. And in many cases, that is the case. If you look like you don't know what you're doing, we have looked like we've known what we're doing from the very start, because we really have. And again, I can't emphasize enough, I am, for better or worse, the face of this on a lot of levels for IU. But there are so many people who have been working on this, literally hundreds of people who have been doing nothing but COVID issues for the last year, and they cannot be credited enough, because that's why we're here and succeeding at this point.
So for those who don't know, and I suspect I may be the only one who does know at the moment, you are the other star of the Ask Aaron podcast, but all you do is open it, ask questions, and then he takes off from there. And he gets a ton of questions, some of which, because it's not a good idea to bluff your way through things, some of which he just says, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's almost his gestures, if I recall. I don't know.
Yeah, which by the way, as a public relations technique, and I've taught PR for a while as well, I always say a really good answer is I don't know, because you cannot fake an answer. If you don't know the answer, you just have to say.
Yeah. Now, tell us this. We know that the White House and the prior administration was putting out a lot of information that was not necessarily on target, or if it was on target, it was off target. How difficult did that make it for you in your job of being the public voice of IU to handle the situation that you had?
It was not. Well, it's not easy when you have things that are going against what your best recommendations are. We, of course, try to stay very non-political because we're not a political agency. We are trying to serve our public, and what we believe is the best advice from our standpoint and what our best policy is, we're going to promote. So we stuck with that. And so if our approach to this was to mask up, but some people doubt that that is the right thing to do, so be it. That's our policy. And we best way to put it, I'd say we worry about what else is coming in. And if somebody wants to ask us about it, we would say, here's why we think it's a good idea. Dr. Carroll addressed that pretty eloquently many, many times on the webinar, that it's to protect you, it's to protect others. It's a simple thing to do. And we don't get into the other issues of that because it's simply our policy. So I think that's been the way we've sort of navigated that, and that served us fairly well. I mean, we certainly don't want to get into the politics of it. That's not my job. It's not my role, and I think that we've been able to get by just really sticking to.
Okay, good. So you talked about the inside information to your faculty, staff, students, and those people. How about putting this out to the public? Talk about how you did that. You talked about your weekly press conference with the county health department and some other stuff. Did you do anything beyond that, or was this basically being ready now for the reporter questions?
Well, we issued a ton of releases as we had key developments, things like, when we're going to online instruction, or in the case of more recently that we're going back to mostly normal operations in the fall. And then that's where I come in to answer questions as they come from reporters. So I did a lot of Zoom interviews with reporters, did other interviews wearing a mask with reporters in person. And that's where I have to really be as knowledgeable as I can be, but also remember the things that I don't know or that are still developing. A lot of questions I have to answer with the answer, look, well, we'll have to continue to keep an eye on that, such as, I get asked right now, well, is it absolutely for sure that you're going to be in person in the fall? Well, the answer to that is that we have a plan to be in the fall right now. That is the plan. If we have a huge spike in COVID right before the fall semester, we'll have to reevaluate that at that point. But I am not a prognosticator, and I'm also not someone who can see the future. So I can only speak to what is logical and what I have knowledge about to speak to. So the public part of this was, a lot of it was I had to answer questions when they came in after we announced new developments, but make sure that the right information was out there as much as possible. As you can imagine, there have been quite a few rumors that have been out about different things. This has been something where people will hear something and then they post something on Twitter, and then you have to try to knock things down. So there's a little bit of that has to happen, where you often work behind the scenes to contact somebody and say, look, this is just not right, and here's why. Or sometimes you have to address it when you get a call at random from a reporter. But you want to make sure that you're not creating an atmosphere of worry more than is necessary, that you are transmitting the idea, again, of competence, but also that you're thinking about these things deeply, and you're not just shooting from the hip. I don't think you could say at any point that IU has done anything rash, has done anything that has been done without a ton of thought. That it's all been driven by the science, by the data, and by what could possibly work on all of our campuses. So my job has been to answer those questions as much as possible, and then give it to other people, the medical experts and our leadership, when it rose to that level or that bit of complexity where it really needed to be them. I am not a medical expert, so I have to know what my role is and what I can answer. And really, it's what I learn from our people who are really on the front lines working on this.
So now the question becomes, and that was a perfect segue to this question: how do you know what you know? Are you sitting in a lot of meetings taking notes, or are they briefing you individually, or how do you find out what you know that you know?
The answer is yes. the, I mean, as I've been sitting here with you, I've had at least two texts, untold emails that deal with various matters, and that's sort of typical. In my email inbox is just insane, and so I have a lot of things that I really have to consult with a lot of people on, and that's a lot of meetings. Today has been one of those days where I've had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions with people, and those days happen. I keep a notebook that is, you'll notice it's one of those moleskin notebooks. This I have, I go through one of these. This one started in January. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and I keep notes on my conversations in it, and date them and note who I was talking to, because I have to be able to go back and refer to these notes all the time. And then I have to, sometimes I just don't remember the answer to things. So I have a lot of people that are in my contact list that I go back to. The number one thing that I don't want to do is guess. I just can't do it. If I guess at something, then the chances of me being wrong are too great to take that chance. I'm not speaking about matters that are small matters to people generally. I mean, think about, we just announced recently our commencement plan. So we're going to have in-person commencement, but it's only going to be graduates. Parents and families aren't going to be able to attend. They'll need to watch via a Zoom link. That has not gone down well for some, but we've explained why, from a health standpoint, it is the safest thing that we can do. So I've been getting a lot of questions about that, and why that is the best way to do it. And so I can think of that's a particularly complex one because it involves ceremonies. So I have to go to somebody in ceremonies to ask a question about, okay, are we going to be masked in the ceremony? Are we going to be sitting 6 feet apart? What's it going to look like? Then there's the medical aspect. Well, why can't you have people in the stands? And the answer is, it's not so much that we could space people out there, but we're asking people, or we're potentially having people coming in from all over the country to Bloomington, creating essentially what could be a mass gathering of people. Exactly the thing we've been trying to avoid. And these are people that we don't have mitigation testing on like we do the people who are going to be graduating. So it's a totally different thing. That's difficult for some people to understand right now. My job is to try to explain that. I've got a phone call, I've got a schedule right now, literally with one person who is particularly upset about that. And sometimes my job comes down to what I call retail politics, where I am literally one-on-one with somebody to say, here's why we're doing what we're doing. There's been a lot of that with this. And so I have to be sure that what I know is correct. And if it's wrong, I got to correct it quickly. And you are going to make mistakes. Nobody is going to be perfect. And if I do get something wrong, I try to say, that was wrong. And I also, again, don't try to fudge it. Don't try to walk around it. If you're wrong, say you're wrong. Much like I don't know is a good answer. If you're wrong, just say, that was incorrect. I was wrong. Let me tell you what this actually is. Humility is a really good thing. I don't know that I have nearly enough of it, but I try to have it in circumstances like that and make sure that I do recognize that there are things that I'm not going to get right all the time, and know what I need to do.
Great, Chuck. Well, I promised you no more than an hour, and we're now at the 54-minute mark. This is sounding like you on Ask Aaron. Uh, one last question. That last question is, what question did I not ask you that you think I should have asked you?
You know, as I start to think back on this, and I've actually thought about it, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about as we start to see the end of this potentially, and I'm afraid to even speak that out loud right now, but thinking about what it is that I will remember, but also sort of thinking about what it is that I'd like to find more research about. I mean, I do. I am an academic in part as well. And so I'd like to think about, okay, what's the research paper that comes out of this? What would I like to learn more about? What I'd like to do is really look back in my notebooks, try to recall the day-to-day things that I don't remember right now and what we were thinking in those moments. It's much easier to look back now and say, what we did here was the thing to do. I will tell you, a year ago at this time, when we went to online instruction only, that was scary. I don't know if other people experience this on other campuses and other people in my role, but that felt like something was happening that was almost beyond our control, and it was the world was sort of tipping on its axis. I can think back on it now, and it was emotional. It was very emotional for our students. It was really emotional for me at the time. I remember doing one interview at that time with a TV station, and I actually started getting choked up in the middle of it, talking about us going to online instruction. And it kind of gets me choked up thinking about it, because I remember what it felt like. I'd like to look back now and try to get a handle on, okay, what have we learned about this for what the next crisis is going to be? Because there will be a next crisis. Hopefully nothing like this, hopefully nothing where nationally 500,000 people lose their lives. God forbid that would happen again. But other things are going to happen. So what do you learn from this? I think the thing that I hope I've learned from this is to really try to stay calm and even, day to day, be the same person as much as possible. Don't panic. Listen to the smart people, because that certainly has served me well in this. And then do what you know is right. And anybody who's going into PR, I would tell you this: work for a place that you believe in. I certainly have that benefit here. I work for a place I wholeheartedly believe in. So it's not hard for me to go out and speak about the things that we do and the decisions that we make, because I think they're done by people who are doing their best for the right reasons at our institutions. So if you can do that, you're in a good place. But I hope that we look back and learn some things from this that maybe weren't possible without something like this. Never had a crisis communications issue that lasted a year. I've had some that came close, but nothing quite like this. And so I think this is a learning laboratory for us all. I joked the other day that it was like an extra graduate degree, and it really was. And we're still finishing it up. I don't think I've reached the dissertation defense stage. So it's really been something. And I think in life you have to be grateful for even the hard events, and that's what I am for this.
Well, great, Chuck. Thank you so much. I think it sounds like you have a great book that you need to start. We need to find a way to get sabbaticals granted to staff members occasionally, like
That's
you.
right.
But thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. I hope we haven't taken up too much of your time, and I've stayed within my hour commitment to you. So thank you very much. We'll be talking again soon, you and I, and I'll send you an email later on today. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Bye-bye. And
You too.
bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for being with us also.